manufacturing practices. And so as a result, we're having these shortages pop up. So, this is another big problem with healthcare. We really need to start building a more domestic supply base in healthcare. And we're actually working on another study for the DoD that's targeting drug shortages as well. And then, as I continue to work on this problem, I'm starting to see these opportunities all over the place in supply chains. And again, I didn't do any media interviews or anything before COVID. After COVID, I've appeared on NPR, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. I mean, you name it. And they're all asking me about why is the supply chain so screwed up, And there's many, many answers to that question. But ultimately, it is because we haven't really done a great job about really rethinking how to design our supply chains. And the root cause, in my mind, comes down to procurement. And procurement has always been really transaction focused, in my experience. They shop around and they beat up on suppliers to get the lowest price, right? But even if you got the lowest price, it doesn't help you if you don't have the product. It's not available. Your doctors can't get, gloves or masks. How good is that low price serving you right now? So I think it's time we really rethink how we design our supply chains. And I'm a big proponent of trying to bring more production, not just in healthcare, but in chips, through the CHIPS Act and others, to North America. And one of the big opportunities, I believe, is in Mexico. Mexico is, they have a free trade agreement. They have labor costs that are lower than they are in China right now. And the best thing is they're, one truck ride away. You can get to Mexico in a day and you can ship the stuff back and forth easily. You can be down there in a day, English is spoken. And if not, you can speak Spanish. And it's really a great place to work. And I've been down to some of the factories in Mexico, and I love it down there. And you go into these factories. I gotta tell this story. Sorry, I'm going all over the place here, but
That's
you
okay.
go. I went into this one electronics factory, and the first thing you see is a daycare, right? And you go in, and it's all these kids in this daycare, and the factory put that in so that the mothers could come in, put their kid in the daycare, go work on the line, come back at lunch to visit with them, go back to work, and then pick them up at the end of the day. Free daycare. What a great idea. So there's some really good stuff that's going on in Mexico. And I think we're going to see more and more production going there and moving away from China. That was a lot. Sorry.
No, it was very good. Thank you. I just want to add, first of all, I want to recognize another good friend and former colleague of mine, Rob DeJaro's on the line. Rob is the Chief Purchasing Officer for Guggenheim Asset Management. So, Rob, thanks for joining. I just want to say, so I went to business school probably many years before a lot of your students were born. But when I did, there were maybe 3 supply management programs in the entire country. Now, I think the latest count is there's 4,000 supply management programs across the country in different universities. Another thing that's different now than was then was that you had a chief executive officer, or CEO. Maybe you had a chief technology officer, or CTO. There were no CPOs. As you mentioned before, Dr. Handfield, essentially purchasing was a necessary evil or something you had to do. I think what people have realized now is the importance of strategic sourcing as opposed to just procurement. When I used to teach for this Institute for Supply Management, I used to say that $1 of revenue may result in 20 cents to the bottom line, but $1 saved on a good procurement or purchasing contract is $1 saved to the bottom line. Mm-hmm. So it used to be, and even at the Institute of Supply Management, they used to have the name National Association of Purchasing Managers. Besides the fact that if you say it too fast, napalm, it doesn't sound so good. They realized that it was too manufacturing oriented, and that there was a whole other category, or more than one category, of spend that can be more smartly done. Chain IQ, which is the company I work for, we focus on the indirect sourcing. So typically it's in companies where that's not their expertise. Let's say banking, so they know banking, but they may not understand how to negotiate a software contract. So I think if nothing else, what I've felt or seen over my career is a change in focus and a more of a emphasis on the importance of that side of the ledger and also in terms of strategic sourcing. So it's work like you've done, Dr. Handfield, that really have brought that into a focus. But now we're on to the next leg of the generation. I know it's all over the news and it's every single quarterly report. Everybody talks about artificial intelligence, but we used to call it predictive analytics, and we've already seen it in our industry and what we do for a living, and how it's improved the state of the art when it comes to purchasing, or at least in terms of strategic sourcing, I should say. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to see what, from the academic side of things, what you've seen as far as where the opportunities are for more careful predictive analytics and artificial intelligence within the space.
Yeah, so I think AI, especially generational AI, is certainly going to be used more in not just in procurement, but in almost every business function. And it's been said that your job is not going to be replaced by AI, but your job may be replaced by someone who really knows how to use AI. And I think that's really a great way to think about it, is that the value of AI is that it's able to go through and conduct analysis of very large data sets in a very short amount of time. But ultimately, you're still going to have the human in the loop. The human in the loop is there to take those options and then ultimately make a decision. And AI is also very good at doing transactional kind of work, which makes you that much more efficient. So AI it can include a number of things. It could include cloud, generational AI, machine learning. There's many different kinds of forms of this. And I think the primary impacts initially are going to be in the procure to pay cycle, where there's still a lot of transactional work going on. So, for example, a typical purchasing manager, comes into work, in the morning, and there might be 20 emails from suppliers in his or her inbox. And, rather than having to go through each one, go through the database and understand what come up with an answer for the question, what AI can do is, it can go through those emails. And so some suppliers may be asking, well, what's the status of my invoice? What's the status of my payment? And so AI can do that. It can be trained to go into the database, extract that information, and then send an email back to the supplier with an update. So maybe half of those emails, it can handle. Maybe a quarter of them, another quarter, say another 5, AI can go through and it can identify some of the data and then put it together in the form of options, like here's option A, here's option B, here's option C. And then ultimately that manager can make a decision, say, well, based on this information, there's some context here, I'm going to choose B. And then maybe a quarter of them, AI can't really help, but it can at least provide you with data and graphics, that it can easily provide and insight to. And that's one of the big things with AI we're seeing, is it's able to take a lot of data and create visuals. I mean, humans, we react best when we've got a graph or a picture or something to relate to. And AI can do that very efficiently. It can create graphics that can help us look for patterns and trends and try to figure out what's going on. The other place that we're seeing AI is it can be very useful. You mentioned market intelligence. Market intelligence is something that procurement increasingly has to do. It has to be able to, identify what's happening in the marketplace. What's happening in terms of risks, what's happening in terms of geopolitical issues going on around the globe, what's happening in terms of weather events that are shutting people down. And so, a human being can go in and browse websites and look around. AI is able to really capture what's going on all over the world. My students use a platform called Resilink. Some of you may have heard of it, but what Resilink does is it takes your supply base and it basically maps out your supply base to all the geographic areas in the world, and then it monitors the web for different events, geographic events, political events, storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, and then it creates it's kind of like the cone of those hurricanes, right? It creates like a cone of probability around it, and it alerts you if any of your suppliers are in that cone or in that diameter around that particular event. And that gives you a heads up. Hey, you better pay attention to this. You better find out what's happening in this area. You better call these suppliers and talk to them and see what's going on. So, again, that's a great application of AI. But again, the human is in the loop. Ultimately, you're going to have to figure out how to manage that event. What we're also seeing increasingly is, I'm a big fan of stress testing. Now, those of you in the financial services industry know what stress testing is all about, right? During the 2008-2009 crisis, financial services had to stress test their capital to make sure that they had enough capital around in case there was a run on the bank or something. So a supply chain stress test is similar, but it requires that you look at, well, what if this happened? Like, what if there were a power outage in New York City? What would happen? What would happen if there was a hurricane that hit Oklahoma? Or what would happen if there was a polar vortex that hit Texas? Well, guess what? A polar vortex did hit Texas, and it shut down the petrochemical industry, right. And they had no resins for 2 years. The price of resins went through the roof, and resins are used in everything from packaging to medical products. So it's really important for people to, kind of look ahead and say, well, what could happen, and then try to plan in advance and say, well, if this happened, we would really be screwed because, we only have one supplier in this particular area. Great example, I live in North Carolina. Western North Carolina was hit by Hurricane Helene recently, and one of the plants that was in its path was a Becton Dickinson plant that produced IV bags. The bags when you go into an ER and they hook you up to saline. Well, they produce 70% of the country's IV bags. It was wiped out. Like, that factory was filled with mud. And it's a sterile environment, right? So, it's going to take them some time to recover. But there were shortages of IV bags. They were canceling procedures for a lot of patients for a few weeks. And fortunately, Becton was able to get the FDA to allow them to bring in bags from other plants in Canada and Ireland and China that they could use, but again, they had to get special permission from the FDA for that. So, these are some different ways that AI can be used. And, I think some of you guys may be using it already. If you haven't, you should check it out. I mean, there's some really cool stuff you can do. Like, for instance, if you take a company 10K report and you put it into Claude or ChatGPT and say, well, what are the essential risks that this company is facing? Or what is the cash position of this company? And are they healthy compared to their competitors? Boom, it'll give you a report. It's absolutely crazy, the stuff it'll do. So try that on your own. The other one, there's one, I forget the name of it, but you can put in a full report into it and it'll generate a 10-page PowerPoint deck for you. I like that one. I use
Right.
that one quite a bit. So, it
Yeah, I
can
remember
really
that.
make you more efficient, and it has some really mind-blowing capabilities. And, you guys should all get out there and try out some of these things. It's pretty cool.
That's pretty amazing. Yes, I will try some of those. I should have said from the start though, please feel free anyone to interrupt and ask a question. But
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
in the interim, well, I think it's my turn to tell a couple of stories. So my area is market data, which is the data typically used for investment bankers and traders to make informed decisions. So I met with this gentleman who runs the data lab, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with the term alt data, but it's equity research on steroids, so to speak. And he told me two fascinating things: that they bought a Chevy Bolt, which is GM's electric vehicle. So this investment bank research group bought a Chevy Bolt and they took it apart piece by piece because they wanted to see where each one of the pieces came from. And then they made decisions, trading decisions, investment decisions based upon where those parts were sourced from. So that's the first one. Then they got in 2 years worth of every single ride from Uber. So who they picked up and where they went. And they determined patterns about what time of the day it was and where these people were going. And then that also contributed to their more informed trading decisions. So you're absolutely, the power of data is just unparalleled. So I'll pause for a second, see if anybody has a question. If not, I have one that I think is very relevant for this conversation. Anyone want to ask a question, or should I just go into the next question? Okay.
Yeah, feel free to ask questions, guys. Happy to answer.
Judah, I can ask a question. This is Melissa Cornier.
Thanks, Melissa. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, I'll jump in here and ask a question. I work with Judah at TrainIQ as well. Nice to meet you, Professor Lee and Dr. Handfield. Dr. Handfield, at the top of the call, you had mentioned, of course, the global nature of what we do. I'm curious what you see for the next 5 or 10 years in regards to ESG, environmental, social governance, when it comes to procurement. Obviously, that's a hot topic, but at the same time, we also know that some big corporations are taking a step back from ESG, like Harley Davidson, I believe earlier this year was one of the companies that stepped back. So curious your thoughts on where we're going with that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. ESG has certainly been something that companies are jumped into full force a few years ago, and in particular, many of them announced these crazy objectives and missions, to be carbon free by 2030 and reduce all carbon emissions by 2025 and so forth. And what they're suddenly realizing is these senior executives that are making these claims to rounds of applause and popping champagne, but it's hard work to reduce emissions. And in particular, most of the emissions come from what are called scope 3 emissions. And scope 3 emissions are, guess what? Emissions from your supply chain. They're from all your suppliers. They're all from all your transportation providers. They're from, the planes that you use to send product from point A to point B. So companies are overwhelmed. They have no idea how to even begin to measure these things. And so I think what's needed is a methodology or a pathway or a framework to help them, measure scope 3 emissions, because that's where most of the carbon footprint comes from. And that's the one that's the most difficult to measure. The other thing that's driving it, I would say, is regulatory requirements. There's increasing requirements for insights and transparency on labor human rights. And, we've been working on a project called the Ethical Apparel Index, where we've been able to take audits and digitize them and quantify them, factory audits. And, we've talked to all these different brands about, using QR codes and putting them on apparel to try to tell people on what if they're abiding by labor compliance laws. And everyone's totally scared of that. No one wants to do it. But despite that, there's several acts, the Fashion Transparency Act in California. New York has a Transparency Act as well. And the EU is actually quite far ahead of where we are. And they're about to pass an EU-wide act that requires complete transparency on labor conditions for all apparel that's produced. There's already laws in Germany and in the UK. And again, people don't know how to provide this information. They don't know how to quantify it. And it's really tricky because audits don't necessarily give you all the information you need. It's really still easy to hide, what's going on, especially if the audits are pre-announced, right? If they're announced ahead of time, they have time to prepare and they know exactly when they're arriving, and they can make it look like everything's a-okay. And that's not the case. And, if you wonder, I'm reading this book, Bottle of Lies, right now, and it talks about how the generics industry in India also got away with a lot of fooling of the FDA by because all the audits were announced ahead of time. So yeah, it's still a very big deal. ESG goals are still critical. I think investors are also very much plugged into which companies are meeting these objectives and goals. But there's still a lot of work to do and a long ways before they can really get to a level of complete transparency.
Thank you very much. That was very insightful. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks, Melissa. Appreciate it. Any other questions before I change topic a little bit? Okay. So, Dr. Handfield, we have a lot of young supply management professionals on the phone. I'll tell you, in the course I'm teaching, I've told this to Professor Dinellen and others, anybody who will listen, in fact. I'm so impressed by these students. First of all, most of them work full time and then they do this, they take the course, but also the quality and the type of critical thinking that they have is pretty impressive. So that really leads to my next question. So, and you're being in the position that you are, is how is the talent landscape and procurement changing? And what are the core competencies that are becoming critical in today's market for a supply management professional to be successful?
Well, that's a great question as well. And there's I think, what I would say is that some of the most important elements of being really good in supply management are the soft skills, as I've said before. And there definitely is a huge demand right now for people in procurement, particularly if you have a quantitative or analytics background. So, I would urge you to, if you love numbers, if you love, working on, spreadsheets or what have you, there's a huge demand for people that have that ability to take large data sets and be able to boil it down to the essential elements and communicate it to other people. So that's skill number one, and there's a huge demand for people in that field right now. The other thing I would say is, the ability to manage projects. And what we have at our school is we have something called the Supply Chain Resource Cooperative, and we have students work on projects in teams, working with clients on supply chain problems. And, they have a faculty advisor. They have someone with experience who kind of mentors and guides them. And a lot of the skills they don't teach them, how to develop a project plan, how to present to a client, how to run a meeting, right? What do you do if your results aren't panning out? So there's a lot of unknowns when you're working on a supply chain project, but a lot of them are the soft skills, effective communication, being able to work with a team, especially if you have a diverse team. I mean, we have MBAs working with engineers, working with chemistry majors. So they'll come from different backgrounds, and having them be able to work together effectively and communicate. And the ability to deliver results. At the end of the day, it's about results, right? You've got to come up with an insight or something that's useful, to your stakeholders. And, that's becoming increasingly important. I just, I wrote a blog. I contain a link to my blog in the chat. But, I talked in that blog about category management. And I would say category management is kind of the next evolution of procurement. And it's where you have individuals that are assigned to a category of spend. So it could be software, it could be hardware, it could be marketing campaigns, it could be castings, right? It could be just about any category of spending.
Right.
And those individuals have to become experts in that field. They have to read the trade journals. They have to keep on top of the intel. They have to be talking to suppliers, and they become the expert in that category. So when anyone in that organization needs something that falls into their category, they can provide them with either a supplier or a contract or the knowledge of where to get it. And that becomes really a professional designation. In fact, I think one company used to call them instead of category managers, they call them category CEOs. So like they were the CEO of that category and they managed that entire category. So I think that's the evolution of where procurement is going is towards category management.
Totally agree. And if I was shaking my head any more vigorously, I'd get whiplash. So I absolutely agree with that. And in fact, I think Luis is the only student that is on the call that's in my class, but the final paper for the class is to write a category plan. So you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Thank you for the heads up.
So it's a perfect segue. I'll give a pregnant pause for anybody who wants to ask a question, but Dr. Lee, maybe I should introduce Luis for to go over a little bit about his role in the club. So any questions before we move forward?
So for the
No?
people who are not familiar with the sourcing, can you explain what is the category management a little bit?
Dr. Handfield, I think that might be a question for you.
Okay, yeah. So category management, I think it evolved, kind of from, marketing category management. So in marketing, they have people that are in charge of, certain aisles in a retail store, maybe it's cleaning supplies or, baby products, etc. And it's kind of marketing category management turned on its head, where you have to organize your category based on the suppliers that fall into that category, not how your company spends it, but how you have to think about it in terms of the suppliers. And a big part of it is creating what's called a spend analysis of that category. And if you can think of a three-dimensional cube, you have all of the money that you spend in that category, and you want it classified by supplier. So how much you're buying from each supplier, who are the stakeholders, like who are the business units and the functions that are using it. And then what are the number of SKUs or the number of products that fall into that category. So that's called a spend cube. And you can look at a spend cube and you can figure out, okay, which divisions are buying most of the stuff and who are they buying it from? And what you find also is a spend management is very often the data is terrible. And when you start looking at the data, you'll find that there might be multiple parts that you're buying that have different SKU numbers, but they're the same part, right? And they're the same part. And also you're buying them from all different suppliers, but a lot of them are from the same supplier and they're charging you different prices, right? So it can really be insightful to give you a picture of where your money is going and how much you're spending and who you're spending it with. And then you can start to category management. The biggest piece of it is engaging with your internal stakeholders. And what I mean by that is talking to those people who are making those buying decisions and saying, look, we can consolidate our supply base. We can get quantity discounts. We can get better value for you. And you get to keep the savings, and you can take those, we're not going after your budget, but you can take those savings and you can hire somebody else, or you can, invest in R&D. You can do whatever you want with that money, but let's make productive use of your money, and let's not just throw it away, on these suppliers. So it really is about engaging internal people and convincing them to get on board, and then putting together strategies that can help either drive cost, improve quality, improve delivery, increase innovation, whatever it is. But the big part of it is, tying your wagon to a horse that, they care about, right? It can't just be about saving money. People don't care about saving money. They care about delivery. They care about quality. Those are the things that matter to them. So you have to be able to, develop a strategy that is aligned with what it is that they care about.
Right. And yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's it.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, the other thing I usually tell my students is you can do an edit replace, just like on Word. You can Microsoft Word. You can anytime the most overused word in the recent vernacular is AI, but the second most overused word is strategic. So every place you see the word strategic, you can change it with the word long-term planning, and it works just the same way. Because half of the battle of putting together an effective category plan or understanding your category is having the runway, having enough time in order to make those better decisions. So my advice to everyone, who works for me or works with me, is to try to get ahead of it as much as possible, because otherwise you're not going to have the wherewithal and leverage in order to make good decisions for your organization. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm mindful of the time, and I just wanted to give Luis an opportunity to introduce himself and introduce the what his the Supply Management Club wants to do. So, Luis, I'll do very quickly, and then I'll let you give a little bit more of a background on the club itself. So, Luis Reyes Alberto, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, is a transfer student from Hudson Community College, and currently the president of the Association of Supply Chain Management, which is an organization that's open to all students in supply chain and interested in learning more. Luis is also one of my students, so I'm very happy to give the floor now to Luis to give a little bit more on what his club actually does.
Good evening, everyone. So, like the Professor Judah said, my name is Louis. I am the president for the Association of Supply Chain Management here at the School of Business. At the Association of Supply Chain Management, we're looking to see if we can get opportunities not only to have events like this, where we have a professional from the field come and speak, but also take tours of facilities. Recently, we had a tour with Open House New York, where essentially we accompanied the company with Beth Rooney from Port Authority. And we were looking at different ports from Newark to Bayonne, and seeing how basically they bring in shipments, how those get off the ships and are transported. So how they're distributed from the ports and therefore. We were looking to have an Amazon facility tour this month, but sadly, because they're wrapping things up for the holidays as things get busier, we weren't able to book that on time. We're looking to do that next semester. We're really trying to see if we can get that hands-on, that real-world experience for students who are interested in supply chain. It's an association open to all students who want to learn about supply chain, even though it is a highly growing field, and I would recommend it to any student who is looking into management. A little bit about myself. I was originally going to do business management until I was told by a Johnson & Johnson recruiter that typically when it comes to people who major in management, those are applications that they typically look over because those management skills are something that you can learn throughout your college journey. And I should look for something that has where I can gain a skill set. So supply chain was a field that interested me, and that's why I picked supply chain as my major. But additionally, as I've gone through the program, I've grown to like it a little bit more. And yeah, we also want to see if there's anything that we can offer to students of the School of Business. Because I am aware that it's the Association of Supply Chain Management and the Financial Management Association as the only two clubs of the School of Business. So if there's any way that we can help the students grow professionally, or if you guys just want overall exposure to the world of supply chain, this is the place to be.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you very much. I do owe an apology to Jonathan and Isela, two other my students that I just noticed are also on the call. So not just Louis, but also two of my other students. So thank you very much for attending. Appreciate it. Okay. I'm going to open up the floor now, and also I'll ask both my colleagues, Travis and Melissa, and my good friend Rob, and the professors Lee and Danellen, if there is any other questions that you wanted to cover in this very valuable seminar.
So I have one thing I wanted to cover, regarding the election last week, and love it or hate the result, it is what it is, right? And one thing for sure, though, to be on the lookout is that the Trump administration will almost surely impose tariffs of some measure, and those tariffs are likely going to be imposed on China. And people say, well, that's good. We can produce more here. You can't just push a button or flip a switch and move things from China. And there's a lot of stuff that comes from China that we can't produce over here. We don't have the capabilities. We don't have the labor. We don't have the capacity to be able to produce it. So that's a little worrisome. We are, as I said, we're seeing some production move from China to Mexico. However, Mexico is still used primarily for assembly, and you still have to have the entire supply chain to be able to produce those components that go into that final product. A lot of those come from China. Same thing with the semiconductor, the CHIP Act. People said, well, we want to build chips here in the United States. Well, that's fine. You can build, a couple of fabs here, but you still need the entire supply chain. I mean, Taiwan Semiconductor has 25,000 suppliers. We mapped them out one time, and it's not easy to make that switch. And even, those fabs we're using here are not going to be able to meet the demand for all the electronics and stuff we're producing today. So, this is an issue that is going to be coming up. And, the fact is, if tariffs are passed at the level that the administration is saying they will on the campaign trail, this is going to impact inflation. There's no getting around it. People will have to pass on those costs, those tariff costs they pay at the border, to the consumer, and that is also worrisome as well. So I wanted to bring that up just because I think there's so much misinformation out there, that I think it's important to get it out there. And people are saying, oh, there's price gouging by retailers. No, there isn't. There isn't. The cost of goods have gone up, and it has nothing to do with the margins of these companies that have gone up.
Yeah, I think in addition to project management, I think supply management students should take economics 101.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
clearly that's pretty basic principle.
Yeah.
So.
And there's, as I say, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So, be aware that if tariffs go into place, we're going to see higher costs for sure.
Yeah.
Peter,
Travis came from. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Peter, I wanted to say thank you for sending me an invitation for this, and Dr. Hatfield, thank you as well. It was very informative, and I think it's great to see so many people excited about supply chain. It's a very important field, quite frankly. It's something every company finds valuable, And what's great about it, in my opinion, is you get insight across everything across the firm. So anything the firm is spending money on, you get visibility into, and you can make a big difference in a firm. As Judah points out, a lot of it goes directly to the bottom line. So it's very important, whether it's direct or indirect sourcing. Judah mentioned he does indirect sourcing. By the way, I think Judah was interested in the car being taken apart because he has a Chevy Bolt, so he was looking for the parts. Actually, I think he was looking to see what they were doing with the spare parts. But anyway, it really is really important. And Louis, the work you're doing with the Supply Chain Association, I think is great. And Professor Lee, nice seeing you again. And again, thank you for inviting me to this session. I do appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. And I just, Professor Handfield or Dr. Handfield, I was going to say that Travis just recently came from Walmart. So I'm sure he's very familiar with many of the issues related to international shipping and the potential for tariffs.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done some work with Walmart. Great company. Really, really good. The other point I wanted to make is, you brought up the Chevy Volt issue. And, one of the challenges I think we're going to see, especially for electric vehicles, is that a lot of the metals, they call them the green metals, there's zinc, lithium, copper, cobalt, and others. There really isn't enough supply in the world today to be able to mine enough of these metals to produce the volume of EVs that we're forecasting to be able to produce. And it takes 15 years to get a mine up and running. So it's going to be a challenge to meet that EV goal with the supply of metals. That's how my mind is always thinking, right? I'm thinking about the future and the supply chain. So.
No question. And it's also difficult to find a charging station for a Chevy Bolt.
Yeah.
If you have a Tesla, no problem. But the Chevy Bolt, I'm running on fumes in a few different cases. Yeah. So, anyone else have any questions or comments?
Professor Lee, yeah.
I think Zamal asked about ESG already, and you talked about it. I think after election, do you think ESG, the practice of ESG will be eased or will keep moving? Or what do you think?
Honestly, I think what'll happen, with the Trump administration, they're going to appoint a guy who is opposed to regulations, environmental regulations. And so they will probably repeal some of the existing laws that are out there. I think the pressure on ESG has come down quite a bit. It's possible the Trump administration may pull out of the Paris Accord, which I think is a mistake. Even Exxon thinks that's a mistake.
I saw that.
Yeah, but I think our foot's going to be off the gas for, metaphorically speaking, for a little while. I think ESG is going to they're going to kick the can down the road a few more years. I think a lot of companies are going to rethink their sustainability objectives and maybe push it further down. It's not going to go away. It is, one COO at Gilead Science said it's integrated into every decision we make. And most companies, feel that way. It's not going away.
Thank you.
You bet.